So, hi guys. The DSLR and mirrorless war is going on quite well at the moment. Lots and lots of different opinions I keep reading and seeing, and it is quite funny because at the end of the day, they're all cameras. We all use them as we all use the ones we choose to use for particular reasons. Either we like that brand, or we're after something new, or a certain brand gives us something that the other one doesn't. But at the end of the day, they all do the same job. They all take amazing photos if they're used properly, and it's a case that there's no point comparing side by side, because if you choose one make and there is no other person next to you with a different make of camera taking the photos side by side, the other photo doesn't exist on a different camera. So if I'm the only person in a wood somewhere and I see a fox or something like that, and there's no one else with me, and I take that photo, that is the best photo of that fox in the woods, because there's no one else there to take a picture, and it doesn't matter what it was taken on, it's still the best one. So in that respect, it doesn't matter, does it? But being humans, we like competition and we like the best of the best and this, that and the other, but it's all opinion based. So it's a case of, I've chosen Sony. I've used them since they sort of pretty much took over Konica Minolta. In fact, I had Konica Minolta DSLR beforehand, and Nikon SLR before that, and I moved away from Nikon mainly because Konica Minolta were giving away so much stuff as Sony was buying them out. Probably one of the best moves I've ever did. And yes, the Sony A700, which is the first Sony one I bought, was basically a Nikon D300. The D300 used the Sony sensor, so the images were looking very, very similar. The difference was the Sony wasn't quite, the build quality wasn't quite there, that it was a bit clunky. Same with the A900, and as we moved along, but they were learning. So a bit like Nikon now, so they're learning, so they've released something relatively quickly to try and get their foot in the door again, and I'm sure they will come along with something else, or an update. Maybe it might just be a firmware update which may sort a few little issues, and the cameras are going to progress, which also is going to push Sony to work out even harder. And then we've got Canon sitting there being very quiet at the moment, wondering what they're going to do. I'm sure they're going to bring something out very soon. They're obviously just sitting there waiting. Sony will bring something else out, a very low light sort of video based body, so another, probably the A7S3 we're thinking. But thinking back how long the DSLR or even the SLR has been around. So the SLR, so a single lens reflex, has been around since 1676. Not as a camera as such, but it was basically it's called a reflex mirror in a camera obscura. So hole in the wall with off mirrors to basically make it up the right way, and then there'd be a painter originally painting onto a canvas, and he would see what was behind him, and eventually it became a camera originally, after obviously a period of time. And so in 1884 the first cameras were produced, but it wasn't until the 1960s where the actual SLR, or single lens reflex cameras with interchangeable lenses, were actually released and obviously being used. And then early 2000s the DSLR was obviously replacing the SLR cameras. A lot of people not liking the idea, and it's exactly like now. You've got all these DSLR owners hating the fact that the mirrorless systems are getting big praising and are pushing forward. Times are changing. So from the 2000s into 2010, the mirrorless camera sort of first appeared properly. But even today, 2018, the DSLR is still the most popular interchangeable lens camera system out there. But that is changing. The mirrorless sales are going up and up, and the actual photography market is actually falling, so it's becoming smaller. You know, you've got people like Pentax that aren't doing much at all, and you're just wondering how long are they going to be around if they don't, you know, start moving forward as well. You know, so that's going to make a big difference. What's going on? That's going to make a big difference. So, you know, the mirrorless system is changing the world of photography. It is definitely changing. There's things the mirrorless cameras can do that the DSLR can't. You know, it doesn't matter if it's from the compact systems, mirrorless systems, to the full frame 35mm or even 36mm full frame cameras, even into the medium format. You know, they can do more than the DSLRs can do, and they're getting better and better and better every single time. You know, we're up to, say, the Sony side of things, the A7 III, the A7R3 and the A9. They are absolutely incredible, and I wouldn't go back to a DSLR. I just wouldn't. It's not because I hate them. I think the cameras are brilliant, but for me, you know, the A7R3 is what I use, and it is incredible. There's a few things you wish it could do, but actually generally it's been so heavily improved now that, you know, there's a couple of little bits you can't do, but it's the same for the DSLR users. They can't do a couple of things that we can do, so you get used to what you're using. You know, like I said, I wouldn't go back to a DSLR. It just makes more sense now to keep moving forward, and once, you know, I'm not going to buy, and I'm not going to look at changing into Nikon. I know the Sony system now for sort of 10-12 years, and you know, it's like if someone said to you, you know, oh, you use Photoshop, don't you? And I'm like, yes. And they say, well, have you tried this program? I'll be like, no. They say, oh, why not? It's brilliant. I said, well, yes, it probably is brilliant, but I haven't got the time to spend a year or 2 years or something to learn the program inside out like I know Photoshop, because I've been using Photoshop for 18 to 20 years. So, you know, it's the same sort of situation with swapping camera makes. You know, you've got to learn the way the actual systems work, the menus. I mean, a camera at the end of the day is a camera. So if you gave me a Nikon or a Canon, Pentax, whatever, as long as you can work out where the major controls are, like aperture, shutter speed, ISO, obviously changing the lenses and things like that, and turning it on, you're going to get some good photos. But you don't know the system, and you're not accustomed to that camera, so it will take you a little bit longer, you know, to get that shot. But you know, it's still possible. You know, so, but the most important thing what we can do is to get our camera, pick it up, stick a battery in it, stick a card in it, pick a lens, and go out and take photos. It doesn't matter what we're using. At the end of the day, there's people out there at certain levels that are using cheap cameras. With, you know, some people are using expensive cameras, some people are using really expensive cameras. But the most important thing for us to do is practice. You know, keep practicing. Just take photos. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You just keep learning, because that's more important than the type of camera you're using. It doesn't matter what make you're using. If you know your system, you know your stuff. You know the techniques. That's going to make you a better photographer than any camera you're going to be using that just because it's new. You know, or it's got a certain certain settings, or this, that, and the other. You know, it's got a new feature that the other camera hasn't got. You know, you work around those. You know, so, you know, it's all about honing your skills, you know, compared to wasting time trying to choose a different system and actually, you know, moving across to a different make, you know, just because, you know, if you're happy with the company you're using, you know, if you're using a Nikon or a Canon, Pentax, a Sony, whatever, why change? Unless you're that frustrated with the technology they're not really bringing out. You know, it's going to make a huge difference, you know. So at the end of the day, just get out there and take photos. That's the most important thing we can do. You know, learn. Just keep learning, keep taking photos, keep learning from the little mistakes we make. And the benefit of digital now is that you can see. you see what you're taking. When I started, and millions of people out there started, you're in film, so you couldn't see. You would take a lot less photos because you didn't want to waste film, and it was expensive, and you didn't really have time, to get everything processed, or even get into the darkroom, and process it yourself or whatever. It took time. Where now it's instant. You see an instant image on the back screen or through the EVF, and that's the real difference. Some of the shots today, I look back and think, how do I even take that? Because at the time, I didn't know that much. A lot of it must have been luck, but you learn, don't you? You learn from trying new things. So that's the most important thing you've got to do. So anyway, guys, that was just a little natter really about the difference between DSLR and mirrorless and the way it's going. And I think it is going that way, and we know it's going that way. Things are changing, technology is moving along, and unfortunately I know people don't like change, because you get used to stuff, and it's unfortunately as we get older as well, there's obviously a lot of older people using some of the the big expensive stuff because they've been doing it for such a long time. To change the whole system over and start learning that again is going to be a little bit harder than if you're a younger person. As we all know, as you get older, it takes a little bit more time to learn stuff. So that's not being ageist. That's a fact. If you give a 10-year-old a new computer or an iPad or something like that, they're in there and learning stuff before we've even turned it on and worked out. So, yeah. So just keep taking photos, guys, and I'll speak to you soon. Please subscribe, please click the notification bell, and I'll speak to you soon.